You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by machinists. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protein Machining, and this week I am happy to welcome back Chris Zappettini. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, man. I am fucking fit to be tied and ready to talk about principles.
Yeah, so we are first going to talk about the end of principles. We stopped about halfway through because I didn't get more than halfway through. I just recently finished the rest of it. So talk to me, man. I know you were all fired up.
Yeah. I did a little bit of research because I was like, the whole two readers thing was wild, and how just like drastic the book is in like part 3 on, and found that part 3 is like the original book. And then the life stuff, which became 1 and 2. So it was like a 5-hour book that became a 15-hour book when he started talking about himself. It really brought to light a lot of stuff. And so I reread it from just part 3 on without especially like one of the most interesting things about that too was he will reference like, remember in the other section when I said this? Well, I'm going to say it again now. Yeah. And you're like, okay, so that other stuff, what, like, just write another book. And he did. He wrote like 2 or 3 more books, one of which I think was published like 2 years ago or something like that. But I found it was very, there was some good stuff in there. Like some of the process flow stuff was very interesting. The like mapping out your workflows there, you can kind of tell there's a lot of like survivorship bias in here, where he's like, well, we made a bunch of money and this is how I would do this going forward. Like when you're going to build a new company, you should lay it all out and like it'll work and whatever, hire all your managers, before you hire any workers. And I think we've both worked at companies, and like a lot of people have worked at companies where that just doesn't work. And
yeah, it doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah. And him running the largest hedge fund in the world, having a ton of money to play around with and be able to like get really good talent and stuff. Like he's probably not on the same playing field as us necessarily.
Yeah, he's sitting there like, yeah, so get $3 or $4 million in managers up and running first, and then get your employees.
But that being said, like there are still like the nuggets are very, very solid. Some of the things that stuck with me, I mean, one of his principles is legitimately like the 5 whys. He doesn't call it that ever.
No, it's 100%. I think it's called drill down in the book, but
yeah.
It is literally the 5 whys.
It was so funny because like, and he's basically saying that he's like, you just keep asking why until you get to the root cause, and you're like,
yeah, I've heard this before. I don't know where.
He's like, he's like, you just have to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to the root cause, and it's like, yes, this is pretty standard root cause analysis. I mean, we know it. It is kind of interesting. I am curious, and I couldn't find anything. It is possible that him not being in manufacturing, that he did happen upon that organically.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, I think last time we talked about like those evergreen principles that come up across all these books, and we can definitely throw the 5 whys up on the list.
Oh, yes.
Many authors, stumble across that in their own way.
Yeah. Yes. And there was a lot of stuff. Oh man, there was another good one. One of the ones that I really, really liked is when you're problem solving, like it means nothing, next to nothing, to just point out a problem, it's like, if you're going to like that you are not a problem solver if you're just like, that's fucked up. Like you need to be able to recognize it and then be able to brainstorm solutions and come up with a solution, which is something that I think I've talked about on here before, and I think you've talked about, is when you talk to, especially like I do projects, if I run into issues, when you run into an issue, you present it with how you're going to proceed.
Yeah. You've said that a few times on here.
Yeah. And that's like, that is, and I think that fucking throw that one on the list, because nothing infuriates me more than when somebody's like, that's a problem. And it's like, okay,
cool. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. And like, what's the suggestion? And when somebody's like, I don't have one, it's like, okay, it's like, that's you. It's like, all right. Or this is on a tangent, is when somebody's like, this might be a problem. Like, oh, okay. So is it a problem now? And it's like, no,
right.
but
how are we going to find out if it is a problem? And if not, let's stop talking about it.
Yeah. It's like, well, it could happen. And like, okay, so how often does that thing happen typically? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? You want me to solve a problem that may or may not happen at an indeterminate amount of time? I can't do anything about that. Like, how about we just cross that bridge when we come to it? And people are like, gosh. And that also is another principle, which is like, don't check twice, do twice. Just parallel path it. Which is essentially what that is, just parallel pathing. Just go after multiple solutions and get to failure as fast as possible, or find out what's going on as fast as possible. That's a super solid one, because I run into a lot of people that they don't want to, like, oh, my macro needs to be perfect, my this needs to be perfect. Like, I need to be able to, this goes back to the other thing, I need to have all my bases covered, and they take so much time. And I'll get into this later too, actually, after post book, just so much time making sure everything is like quote unquote perfect. And then you get to implementation and it just falls on its face immediately, which is kind of nutty.
I mean, I feel like if you're in manufacturing, unless you have the luxury of time, like if your customer gave you 8 months to spin something up, then you might not have stumbled across this. But for me, especially job shopping, there's very often that like I'll buy double the amount of material that I need, because it's like, okay, my plan A is high risk, high reward. It could work really well, or it could crash and burn, and I'll have to restart over and do the sketchy thing, or like the non-sketchy thing, you know?
Yeah.
Or I'll buy tooling for 2 separate pathways that this part could go, because I don't have time to wait on shipping for the second set of tooling later on.
Yeah. You just it's a weird calculated risk, just going for it right away. But you know once you go that like you don't have the time to like double back. So you just throw it out there and then keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Another good one that we were discussing before in the radical truth and the radical transparency aspect of it is just having open and honest communication with your employees to find out what's going on with them, especially if you see weird things in their performance and stuff. And I had a practical example of that for somebody who no longer works for me, where they were having issues, and it was definitely reflected in their performance, where like I get hit up in the middle, like I'm trying to reach them in the middle of the day on like a weekday, and like they were supposed to be working on a proposal, and it's like, oh, sorry, hitting balls or whatever. And you're like, oh, that's okay. Yeah, fun, very fun. As I'm having myself just worked like 10 hours, driving 2 hours to another customer to like work some more. My guys
hitting balls.
Hitting balls. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I I called him, we eventually got a hold of him, and I'm like, and it's just like, what the fuck is going on here, man? Like something is up, and like, you're not communicating with me. So like, what do we do about this? And it was personal things that were happening, like mostly related around like a girl or whatever. And you're like, okay, fine. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry or whatever. It's not going to happen again, which is something that is also a principle, which is like people who have a certain type of behavior and say that they won't do it again will probably do it again. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. And I mean, sure enough, in this situation, like not too much longer after that, something else came up, and like, oh, we had another job. Oh, we have a potential job, and this guy had zero work at the time, and it's like, oh, it's probably in Mexico, big automation job, robo drills. We know robo drills, so that'd be cool. And he's like, I don't really want to go to Mexico. It's like, dude, what do you like? I kind of lost it at that one because
I bet
I was working on something I didn't really want to work on. James was working on something he didn't want to work on. Scoob was also working on something he didn't want to work on. We were just doing things for the company because, like, we can't always work on cool shit. Unfortunately, like when you get to a certain level, you can pick and choose your jobs and things like that. I not quite there yet. We still we are working towards that, but haven't quite got there yet. Obviously,
well, that was even a principle. Was I think 14.1 was work for goals that you and your organization are excited about. But
yeah,
part of that is that he talks about sometimes you will have to do things you're not excited about in the pursuit of the exciting things.
Yeah, he talks about that a lot. Like that was when he's like, most of this shit isn't fucking glamorous, man. Like you're just doing, like, you're just drudging through the day to day, and you're gonna have to work hard to like build your business. So just know that not every day is going to be awesome. It's going to be hard. And so like when your employees, like, who is essentially just a rock on the company, like it's a literal anchor, 1/4 of the company is generating zero revenue, is negative because it's just money out, is telling you that they don't want to do stuff. I mean, that was a clear indicator that he wasn't a good fit for us. And that was another. This is actually, like, all of these principles, I could almost apply all of them to this situation, which is friends and family, and having like a personal investment in your employees and wanting them to work, and having that affect how you review employees. Like, there was a point where I probably should have let him go sooner, but I didn't. And I'm still feeling the effects of that now. And it's, yeah, when you take, like, it's just such like an about face from last week's episode, or the last episode we did on this, because like just looking at the work principles as they are very good. Some of them are a little contradictory, and some of them
that.
And some
like,
of them,
especially about pay, he goes, pay them a lot, but don't pay them too much. But you pay them enough, pay more than fair. And it's like, okay, I got to find this incredibly small sweet spot then that is all of these things. Yeah.
Another one was the data driven approach to, like, promoting people, and what to do with people that get promoted and like fail. It was just such a weird section because this guy's like, I want to do this job. And they're like, okay, but by all these data points, it looks like you would suck at this. Would you agree? Yes or no? And that's like such a crazy way to go about it. I mean, it's fair, but by that reasoning, you would think that almost everybody that gets promoted would work out with how he's talking about the data and everything. But he talks kind of in depth about when you promote somebody and they don't work out, that well, you can't let them go back to what they were doing before, because you're feeling that now you're preventing somebody else from going up into that position. And so can you move them laterally? Probably not, because they just failed. So you probably just need to get rid of that person now. And it's like, whoa, like what is it? That part really, it doesn't really work in my brain, like the promotion and moving people around. It seems almost too slavish to data at a certain point.
Yeah.
That, I mean, obviously it works for them. Like he's built his whole culture. The whole company is built around this data-driven approach. Like, I don't know if you looked into the dot connector at all.
No, I haven't yet.
It is wild with that. Like,
really?
Yeah, it's just very like in real time, like being like 3 out of 10, that comments kind of stuff. And,
I did think that like the conversation that they showed talking about somebody leading a meeting and then immediately being, telling them, I think you deserve a D for that meeting. And here are the reasons why. A, made me want to issue a disclaimer. If you are reading this book and coming up in business or starting your own business, a lot of the radical stuff can only be applied in a company-wide type of thing.
Yes.
Don't apply it to your own life unless everyone else that you interact with is on board. Because if you go into a company, whether or not you mean right by it, you can say, oh, I'm just telling you these things because I want you to be better. All you want, you will come across as the biggest asshole if you are the only one doing it.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's when he's like, this is the best way to run a company. And do you want to work in this type of environment? Just like start doing it maybe. And I do agree that some of these things are awesome, but they are like you almost have to build a business with this ideology in mind from like scratch.
It'd be like, it would be as if you had a friend that every time you saw each other, you hit each other in the arm. You punched each other and laughed about it. And then you just hit some random stranger. It would go from a fun thing to assault that quickly. And really, I think a lot of the radical honesty stuff would come across the same way.
Yeah, you can't, that's not something you just like turn on. Some of these other things you can like kind of just turn on, like from the other books, like collecting data and like trying to alleviate a bottleneck through process change or something. You can just kind of like start to like really turn that. Like that's just like a knob you can turn.
Yeah. And like understanding humans more, that's all things that are more widely useful. Mm-hmm. I think the radical honesty stuff is super useful if you can get everyone on board, but you have to have that conversation. You have to work at it and realize that people's feelings will be hurt and you will burn some bridges for sure.
Yeah, because on a side note to that too, that's not necessarily a principle, but just on brand or on topic for just doing something. A lot of times, like any cult, like we should probably do like a change management book at some point, because the amount of times you see, like I've seen it a lot. You probably have come across it too, where like there's all of a sudden somebody higher up gets a hair up their ass and they're like, all right, culture change right now. We're just doing something different. And everybody's like, whoa, what the fuck, dude? Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that ERP system we're using, fuck that, new ERP. We also have this other thing now that you need to use. And also, yeah, we're just gonna start yelling at each other in meetings, and you're like, whoa, all right, and people just, but that's the entire direction, right? And then everybody just kind of goes about doing what they're doing because there's no like push to do this.
Right. There's no adjustment period. There's no reminders. It's just here is what the new thing is.
And
Have
then
fun.
people are like, gosh, why isn't this working? Why is people aren't producing more? People aren't reading these books that I want them to read. And like, they're not using
I've seen exactly that. And you get half of the company super jazzed because they thought that it was needed, and it probably is.
Yeah.
You get a large majority of the company saying, screw that. We've always done it the other way and it's worked fine. I don't see any problem. And they're usually, by and large, the ones that are causing the problem need the culture change the most.
1,000%. Yeah.
And then you just have like the people who are kind of checked out anyway, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. You have the pro. Yeah. Like pro, against, and just like straight up neutral. Like, don't fucking bother me. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah. I'm punching a clock. What are you doing?
Yeah. Which are typically like operators, and like in that situation, like people on the floor. I was actually talking to a buddy of mine who I used to work with at South Bay about he's building some like really cool stuff using a lot of like Microsoft tools, essentially building like their own version of AutoCrib internally, which is pretty sweet. But he's doing it because as they implement a new tool library, there's a big disconnect between engineering and the guys on the floor. And so like tools are being built or they're not being built, and engineering doesn't know about it. And so programming is either lagging or ahead, and nobody knows which one it is ever. And so we're talking about there's a change management system called ADKAR, which is like A is awareness. That's the one. That's the first one, is A, awareness, which is kind of like what I like to call the inception period, where you just get people to think that this change is their idea and good before you even start to change anything. You just make people aware that there is a problem and change needs to happen. And that period of time is the most critical, and nobody ever wants to do it, because a culture shift that large, especially like obviously the bigger company it is, like a company like you or like your company or my company, if we wanted to change the culture, we can just do that, because it's you and one guy and me and one guy.
Right.
So
yeah.
like,
I turn to Brad and say, hey, this is how we're doing things now.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, or no, I don't like that. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's very simple. But a company, even like 10 people, 20 people, is going to be a bit more difficult. And then when you get into like 100, 150 people, it's like such a much bigger problem. Because like he says in the book, that as you start to grow, like you just don't know the people personally anymore. It's just not the same. And so you have to start doing things a lot differently. And the economy of scales, like in terms of knowledge, becomes so vast and so different. And like why processes become so important.
Yeah.
You can't just flip a switch anymore.
Well, and something you can infer from his principles and that I've seen in practice is if you are higher up at a company that is about to do a culture change, you need to be fully ready to fire people.
Yes.
You will have people who will resist, and they will be the poison apple for the rest of the company.
Yeah.
Like you can give people a accommodation period and talk to them about it and pull out those specific people aside. But at some point, you have to make that change. There are some people who will be so stuck in their ways or just assholes or something that they don't want to hear it and they don't want to change. And you can't have dissension if you're doing a company-wide culture shift, period.
Yeah, 100%. Even without a culture change, I think there's a good rule of thumb is I don't care how good you are, if your attitude is fucking trash, it just doesn't matter, because it's always your way or the highway. And that's just not how a company really operates most of the time. Like if that's the case, then go run your own shop or be your own programmer or whatever.
Exactly.
But the people who are like, I'm so good that they'll never fire me, or it's like, you should be fired. You should be fired from everywhere.
The worst is even when they're not that good, but the company feels like they can't lose them. Like management won't fire them because they don't feel like they can replace them.
Yeah, that actually is, that's a really, really good point, because I think we've all worked at places that have somebody where management's like, oh, we can't get by without him. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I was at a shop where the programmer, this was fairly recently, the programmer, well, the shop floor hated this guy, and he did a terrible job. Like, he never had, like, nothing was defined in Mastercam or anything. So like every tool came in with like the generic tool holder. So you never knew what to build. They would just build tools, and none of his programs worked. But because they hated him, they just, like, the shop floor got really fucking good at just figuring it out and making it work, because everything that they're doing is just like, it's just cleanup, you know. It's the parts are already made, it's abrasement, whatever, you just have to clean up some surfaces, no big deal. It's like straight line cuts and drilled holes. But he would routinely like end up being like, oh yeah, you got to stick the tool out this far in a generic tool holder. Okay. And then that tool just fucking smashes into this like $10,000 part, gone. Oh. and they're like, well, we need a programmer. It's like, do you? I don't know if you do. It seems like he's causing more problems and nobody wants to talk to him. So is it worth like having a body at that desk? Like, it seems like the guys are working it out, and then creating a void will allow you to, you know, find the right guy. Or somebody internally could fill that position and make it work.
Right. Yeah.
Who like actually wants to do it.
Right. Yeah. No, actually, you jogged a memory. When I started at my first job, I was super green. I think taking the first Mastercam class maybe, and there was a guy that they had just hired that talked a big game. Like, he was really kind of nice, and just like thought he was the hottest programmer around. And turns out, I mean, he crashed a bunch of machines, and turned out he was a meth head, and wouldn't show up for days or whatever. He got fired. But months later, when I was actually programming machines, I went into one of his programs because we were rerunning. We rarely did repeat work, but when we did, we had the Mastercam files, and I went in, and the program structure was like op 1, op 2, op 2 fix, op 2 fucking fix, op 3, op 3, like, and you could just look at it and you're like, oh yeah, he was on drugs. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. That is something so interesting, like going into somebody else's program and seeing like what was going on here. Cause like a lot of, I just started using folders in the setups to organize my tools. And even Fusion does that better than Mastercam too, because Mastercam uses tool groups, but the folders are way cooler because you can just like select the folder, and then when you start making toolpaths, it's just putting the toolpath in that folder. So it's like, oh, I'm working with this tool now. So like boom, 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 boom. And like also the program that I'm working on has like, I don't know, 200 operations or something like that. So it's like, it's just so long.
It's super cool, but I think we've been asking for years. And if anyone's from Fusion is listening, give me operation folders as well. So I can group things like, this is my fixture folder or my Softjaws folder, and it has all of my programs, all my setups for Softjaws, and then it has all my setups for this part. That would be amazing.
I would die for that. Yeah, I would die for that. Another thing that I would also die for, since we're talking about Fusion, is like, give me a way to import a fucking DXF or a solid as a tool. Like, my God. Like
I can show you where there's a script to import a holder as a solid.
I use
can't
that
do it for a tool.
Yeah, I use that to get all the Rego stuff in there. But holy shit, it's like some of a barrel cutter or like just a tapered ball, and you're like, it's like, all right, what magic number do I have to put in here to make my flutes matched with the shaft like exactly the way it is in real life? It's like, why is this so hard?
Yeah. My guess is that eventually that will get some attention, because I think it is a big gap in comparison to a lot of other cam softwares, but
yeah,
not yet.
It is I mean, like, this is my hold on. Do we have anything else on the book? Do you want to keep going on the book?
I have one more thing, or two more things.
Going. Yeah, let's finish. Let's wrap that shit up.
Yeah, so one thing I had written down that I thought was an amazing note that he has in there was talking about fairness versus generosity. And I had never heard it split up like that. But that sometimes you're just being generous and it doesn't have to be fair. The example he gave was that they were paying for buses to bring in people from New York to the Connecticut office. And then the people in the Connecticut office were saying, oh, well, we drive in. You know, some people who were driving in from New York were saying it's kind of unfair. And he just goes, this is just me being nice. I don't have to do any of this.
Yeah.
You know, let alone pay for your gas. That this is different. You know, you can ride the bus too if you want.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of those ones where when you hear it, like it just instantly blows your mind. You're like, oh, I've been like, this is something that like you kind of think about often, you know, but you can't like articulate why you're feeling a certain way, or why, like, when somebody asks you a certain question that's like along with those, like why can't I articulate why what I'm doing is correct? You know, at least like for my intention of what this is. Because fairness is like what you pay somebody, you know? And I think
I thought it's something that I get caught up in, I think, a lot, where I do something for someone and then think, oh, well, how will my other friend feel if he finds out? And it kind of made me realize it doesn't matter. You're just being generous.
Yeah.
You don't have to be equally generous. You don't have to be fair and generous to everyone.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Because then it's not like, at a certain point, if you're thinking that way, it's almost like transactional. And you're like, well, I got to spread the wealth like to your comrades, you know. And you're like, everybody's got to get the same bit, but it's like, sometimes.
So I really enjoyed that. And then going back to what you were talking about with your employee, like just radical honesty, the thing that stuck out for me for that chapter was him talking about that it's unfair for you to not be honest with people, because you are then judge, jury, and executioner for them in your brain. You are assuming. I get caught up in that a lot, where I think, okay, this person, I'm having this problem with them. I'm going to say this. They might say this. And then this happens. And then this happens. And therefore this happens. And I'm like 8 steps down the line and we haven't had a discussion yet. And I'm already angry at them for something they said in my brain.
Yeah, you're like, get out of here. Yeah.
So hearing that and having it expressed like that, I think was very important for me to hear, because it is so unfair to that person to not give them the opportunity to, you know, share their side. Because like you said, it might be something real. Like there might be some extenuating circumstance, or it could just be habitual and that's the kind of person they are. But you have to give them the chance to tell you.
Yes, exactly. It's just, I mean, this is the evergreen thing. That's the tenet of like every single book, every single business book, which is just talk to people internally, externally, just communicate as frequently as possible. like some people say over communicate, just like which I think can kind of get you in trouble sometimes, but for the most part, like you can't really communicate too much,
Yeah, I agree. All right, so off the book, what else you got?
What was so this project, what I was saying before we finish the book up was like Fusion is just it's so good for what it is, right? Which, I mean, I'm not saying anything that people don't already know. Like almost everybody that listens to this podcast uses fucking Fusion, but I'm in the middle of almost done with one of the 3 parts for our Matsura turnkey, and it's like it is doing such a good job at something that I normally would just do in Mastercam. And I'm still running everything through Camplete, and we got that workflow pretty dialed in. And like Fusion is just like, it's so close to being able to just like truly like dominate the industry. But it's just missing like little things, that are so trivial. Like the ITAR thing, crazy. Like, how do you not have any way to do ITAR work? Or just not keep stuff on the cloud, or like or use like the .gov, like something .gov, AWS Gov or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's a solved problem. Like Microsoft has their Gov thing and AWS has it. So like, why are you not hopping on this train? Because you probably would get a lot of people to do this. And this is obviously something I think Nick at P3D has mentioned it, like getting Mastercam to, or somebody like getting, I think it was him.
He bought Inventor, I think, for like some ITAR work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was talking to Easton about using Mastercam for ITAR stuff. So it's like you can actually save things without having to do some like wonky like export deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because God, it sucks so bad that you can't like, oh, I have all my fixture libraries and everything. Joke's on you. You can't import that fucker into your part file because you have to save it
because you're offline.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like, dude, what? Come on.
I mean, I think that you're 100% right. First of all, I'm not being an apologist at all for this. Or not really, but the thing I think we very often gloss over in the Fusion discussion is how recent it is.
It's so new. Yeah.
Like if you look at Mastercam or like SolidWorks at the same age as Fusion is now, you would not choose those softwares most likely.
Oh, for
sure.
At
least in the modern day market.
You would. It's one of those things. I think that's like you would expect them to have built on some of the things that the other like. Because again, it is so good for what it is and how much it costs you. It's absurd.
So it's 9 years old. I just looked up, which is pretty crazy.
That is pretty crazy. And like, it's the mainstream popularity. It's probably not quite 9 years, probably like 5-6 years, you would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just for point of reference, SolidWorks is 27 years old.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is, I think it's very interesting because they have so many teams working on it at different stages. You have your design, your simulation, and they're all working together. It's just weird. Like I remember up until, I want to say a year ago, but with the way that time goes now, I kind of forget. But we didn't have text on an arc in the design workspace for the longest time.
Yeah.
Just a very basic design tool that people had to, hack workarounds going through Inkscape and then importing as a DXF and things like that. So it is weird how sometimes they're so far ahead of the curve. They have like some of the bleeding edge tool paths from like ModuleWorks or whatever. And then they'll be like, yeah, but you can't put text on a curve, or you can't import a tool DXF or solid model.
Yeah, I think that is what, like, you kind of hit on what makes it frustrating, is that it is a lot of the times on the cutting edge, and then the stuff that you would expect to be there because it is like so far ahead in other things, it's just like not there. You're like, what the fuck? But yeah, anyway, no, it's
Mastercam's 40 years old, by the way.
Mastercam, the .pst file extension, which is now what Outlook uses, is originally, like, that was Mastercam's originally for their post files, and then Outlook co-opted it and then took it over. But it's kind of crazy.
Or I guess I should say CNC Software Limited, which is the company behind Mastercam, is 40 years old. So who knows how Wikipedia won't give me their age, but still, when we're talking about it in terms of that, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot.
Yeah, that is literally like parent-child relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it is, and I have no doubt that Fusion will get there. Like, a lot of the time, more than ever, am using Fusion, so I'm running into these things a lot more. Like, when I program my machine, I'm not using Mastercam. I'm using Fusion. It's just so much better,
right,
and faster,
and cheaper.
I mean, I have both. So, like, I only use Mastercam now pretty much if a customer is asking for it. I was just doing some swerve cuts today on the Matsura for that part. Like, it's pretty easy to program and just output. I mean, I ran it through Camplete, but the code was great. I don't know. It's just so fucking good. I guess that's all this is like, this is our first like real big project with Fusion, and it's holding up really well. Kind of that's blowing awesome. The customer away, because they're like Fusion, I don't know. It's like, this is gonna be fine, and they're like, how's it gonna do this? And but it's like, don't worry about it. It's gonna work. Like, and they're like, I don't really know how to use it. It's like, you're using SolidWorks Cam right now. Like, you're gonna be fine. This is better than that. I've only ran into like a handful of people who are like, gosh, Fusion is hard, and I'm like, this is a red flag.
Right, yeah. What are you using that you think is easy?
It's like, this is hard. Like, my buddy one of the guys that helps me out, he hadn't programmed in like 4 or 5 years, and he's like, do you have an extra seat of Mastercam? Can I use your Mastercam? And I was like, no, you're not using Mastercam. I was like, get Fusion. It's $500. Like, I'll buy it for you. He bought it for himself, but I was like, just get that. And he's like, and then he made some parts, and he's like, wow, that's absurd. It's like, yeah, it's insanely intuitive. It just works. And if you can YouTube everything that you need to know, period. So like, this, like, oh, my customer, relax, this is good. It's either this or Mastercam, and Mastercam is way more expensive, and you're going to get the same thing anyway, so might as well. And they have Fusion already, actually.
Right.
Because Matsuras come with Camplete, and Camplete comes with Fusion. So it's just
interesting.
Yeah. And when you have Camplete, you automatically get the daddy version of the manufacturing module comes with it, all like the 5-axis stuff too.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you don't. Yeah, it's just something that you have that gets turned on once you get Camplete, which is cool. Because I didn't put that together until I was like, why do I have this? I don't remember buying this, but I have. We bought Camplete for the Hermela project that we were doing, so I have it. I don't have a need for it anymore for the C400, but I have that. So if anybody has some C400 stuff they need to let me know. I can program some stuff for you.
So we've been talking all week you've got a soapbox you want to stand up on. So let's dive into those discussions.
Wait, hold on. First, what's going on with you before I fucking steamroll you?
Let's see. Update since the last time. Just been making a ton of parts. I head to the DSI event 2 weeks from, or a week from Monday, something like that.
Yeah.
It's now Thursday. I leave, I think, Monday night, the 21st. So I've just been making a ton of parts to try to get myself out of, well, not even a hole of parts. Like, we're just steadily and good busy, but I just need to make sure that I can be gone that week.
Yeah. And not leave Brad like just totally fucking overwhelmed with shit to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a few assemblies that I've been working on that need a few big pieces done on them. And so that's my big charge for next week, is finishing those up and assembling them and shipping them.
Do you do a lot of assemblies?
More and more recently.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So they just give you the whole package instead of having... I wonder, like, did you have like conversations around that with your customers? Like, where they're like, could you just do the whole thing because people just don't make parts as good as you do? Or
no, they just were like,
just shows
hey,
up.
Quote this. And
Yeah.
I look, and there's a bunch of COTS parts, and thankfully they design a ton of stuff off of McMaster, which makes my life easier. Makes quoting COTS parts and things like that so much quicker.
Yeah.
But yeah, just been doing more of that, which is fun. You know, it's something that I'm not used to. It's the first time that I've considered looking into ERPs or paying somebody to at least flesh out our Asana thing more, because having check boxes of, oh, you've ordered all the COTS parts, you've ordered all the, Loctite you need, you've ordered all this stuff, keeping it in my head or in my email is not ideal.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So we'll see what happens. Besides that, we are still in talks with that first place that I think I was talking about last time to move.
Yep.
They are asking a lot of questions. So when I was there with the agent's partner or employee, whatever, she was the one who was showing us around, I had asked about the thickness of the slab.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've ever been asked that question. And so it like set off all these red flags and like alarm bells, I think, in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they've been asking me like all these questions of, oh, well, how heavy are your machines? We need to check with other tenants and see if they have machines that are similar weight, because we're worried about it. And then it was, oh, well, what's the footprint so we can calculate the PSI? Because I'm constantly thinking, this is an industrial zoned place. It has a standard slab, probably the same thickness as our current shop. I had a 12,000 pound Kitamura on my floor without any issues for years.
Yeah.
And now they're asking me about like 5,000 and 8,000 pound brothers. And the whole reason I brought this up is I told her, hey, we're looking at heavier equipment. If we need to, we will just pour a sub slab.
Yeah.
We'll get it cut out and we'll get a sub slab poured. Not a big deal. And so anyway, we've been going back and forth on that. And then there was a second place that popped up that we were super excited about because it had like 600 amps of 480.
Yeah.
And then they leased it out from under us. They said, oh, well, we'll call you the second the landlord is ready to show it. And then, yeah, it was gone. So
damn, sweetheart deal. Somebody was in there.
Yeah, I don't know if it was somebody that the real estate agent knew or whatever, but I think because we wanted to tear down the offices, maybe they just took the easy way out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
We don't want to do any work, which is, I mean, obviously that's the way to go.
Right.
If you're in that business, just, I don't have to do anything. Yeah. No problems.
Yeah. That's why I'm shocked that this other place is still talking to us. So fingers crossed it all works out.
Yeah. Seems like a good sign. That's definitely a good sign.
Yeah. But that's pretty much everything on my end. Nothing all that exciting to talk about.
Nice. Okay.
So soapbox it up.
Soapbox it up, baby. Yeah, I'm trying to like think of what the like inception point of this was, like where this started. Um, I know that you and I was maybe it was last or Monday or something when I was in Arizona for like a day, and you had mentioned talking about um like automation and hiring and like process and stuff like that, and the training program that we're starting.
Oh, yeah.
And
So I had reached out to you because I've started to have this feeling that, well, it's kind of two feelings. Like, we are in a period where I think a lot of shops are seeing incredible growth. And I think the winners of this period, if this keeps up, which it so far doesn't seem like it's slowing,
yeah,
are going to be the ones who handle the growth the best.
yes, yeah, and
And
then
we were talking about how I don't think that automation is the end all be all for that being an elegant
yeah,
growth company, because you're still going to need people. You know, if you have a dummy in front of a robot and the robot breaks, he's not going to be able to tell you why it's broken.
yeah, yes. Okay, so I'm all right. I can feel the fire building inside of me, and part of this is like a lot of people view, oh, I'm going to put a robot on my machine and I will make money, just like you were saying, and that's almost never the case unless you're really really good, um, and you just kind of inherently understand automation and stuff like that. Like I would say some guys that have figured it out, um, is like Brian Kippen. He's a really good example of somebody who figured it out, who doesn't take this approach of oh, if I'm going to automate, if I buy a pallet system, I must be doing long runs of things. High mix, low volume, like high mix, low volume isn't something that can be automated. Oh yeah, I'm mounting this soapbox right now. Like I like feel the fire.
But I
And
mean,
so
even Brian is an
yeah,
excellent example of
yeah,
understanding that
yes,
automation doesn't mean that you don't need a good, like a
no,
awesome team behind
yeah.
you.
And I think that is what automation allows you to maintain a group of A's, you know, because what ultimately ends up happening when you start to like the amount of shops that as they grow, and I think you and I have talked to like James Servin, right, is a good example of this, where he hadn't had his process. He's working on dialing in his processes now to maximize what he can get out of his two pieces of equipment. But like that's now at before I've had this conversation with him and you've had this conversation with him about he's talking about buying like another spindle. And it's like, why are you buying another spindle? It's like, because I need XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Or like when I was texting with him earlier and he like I was telling him like I owe it when people come to me and they start asking me questions, I a lot of the time I ask why. And he was like, the amount of times that you've absolutely floored me just by asking why is absurd.
Better hope it's those 5 whys.
Yeah. I just keep drilling down until he's crying, typically. But no, it's just like because it is such an enticing, like if you can rationalize it, which a lot of people do rationalize it. Oh, I'll just buy another machine. I need to make more parts. I'll buy another machine. I need to make more parts. I'll buy another machine. And then all of a sudden you have like 50 machines that are operating at like 20%, 30% maybe, and like 100 people that are most of the time doing like nothing. And it's how did you get here?
So actually, there's a good link back to the book with that, because it was another note I had given myself in 14.2. It's about recognize that everyone has too much to do. And he talks about how when you have too much to do, the only thing you can do is either, I think, do less, you can delegate, or you can optimize.
Yep.
And I think far too many people get too much to do and then they delegate to robots. And what they don't realize is that delegating to robots is literally delegating to worse than a monkey.
Yeah. Shit, dude. Delegate to robots or more pieces of equipment or adding people. And it's just weird. It's a weird modality of not wanting to oh no, I have a good process, but my spindle utilization is trash. My throughput is trash and I don't have enough people. It's like, so what you're saying is I think I text your process is working as you designed it, but not as it's intended to work, which is making more parts in like a given amount of time. Because if your spindle utilization is trash, like there's something is not correct. And if your throughput, which I think, and like, I don't know, like for me, throughput is the metric, is how many parts you get out in a given amount of time. It seems like that's probably the one, if you're going to pick metric to measure your process on, is how many parts am I shipping and making money on.
I mean, that's back to like the goal and critical chain. I mean, that's foundational. That's evergreen stuff, right?
That is, It's funny though that people still look at things like cycle time and machine uptime, because who fucking cares how fast you're making parts? Which sounds crazy to say.
No, I've all seen people turn machines down so that their numbers are better.
Yeah.
I've literally worked with those people. Back to our earlier conversation, those are the people that should have been fired. Then they don't, but they're only graded on my machine uptime, so I'm just going to run 20 warm-ups before I start my day, and then I'm going to turn my feed rates down to 50%.
Or we were at a place that we got there, we reduced the cycle time of their programs, and they were like, cool. And the operator is straight up like, we're still going to run this at 80%.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
And the flip side of that is equally true. You can't judge an operator or a setup guy by the number of parts he makes. It's the number of parts that leave the company.
Yes.
Because I worked with a guy who regularly would go, this is running too. Never had programmed in his life, and would just crank his feed rate knobs to 200%. And then would, create a bad surface finish, or would create a little ding where the machine was not quick enough to like react to it, and it wouldn't get caught till inspection, and then it would be scrap or it'd be rework.
Yeah.
And so if you graded him just on parts that he was producing, oh man, he looked like a rock star. He was doing, 50% more a day, 100% more a day, depending on how many machines he was running. Yeah. And then it would get through inspection or assembly and it'd be crap, absolute crap.
And that is why, like, when I say throughput, I'm like, I mean, obviously it is shipped good parts, because I've been at places where they talk about the operator efficiency. Like, oh, you should be in like the 90%. You just need to be cranking through guns or whatever. And it's just like, you get people just cutting corners with the caveat of good parts. It's like, that's a bit of a different story. Like, now you're talking about, how do I improve my process? Because the flip side of the turning the feed knobs down is the guy who's just who on the cycle time thing is, if we've all met somebody who's like, oh, how fast do you think I made this part? And you're like, I don't know, like 15 minutes. And he's like, 9. And you're like, cool. Why isn't the machine running now? Broke all my tools. Like, cool. Sick, dude. Very, very efficient. I see that saving those 6 minutes to take you down for 3 days was a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I always tell Joel whenever I'm asking about Freza tools. Yeah. I tell him, listen, I'm a prototype shop. I might be making 5 of these parts. Yeah. I want something that's reliable. I understand that you have tools that can go balls to the wall and they might work for a long time. I want something I can turn down a little bit and make my parts, and I know they're good, and I know it's not going to break. Because I break one tool and I've just lost all my efficiency gains.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't need to always make fireballs. And I mean, speaking about like process and like my general approach, and this is like another thing when it comes to automation, is I don't like, this is like, initially when you're like building a system or whatever, I'm not typically going for like the most optimized program in the entire world. I'm looking for a program that's going to make a good part like pretty much first shot, you know? And is that 80% of optimized? Is that 70% of optimized? I don't know. But like my goal is to get a part on and off of that machine as fast as possible. Right. And this is what I was talking about this morning was if you were making 5 parts and you spent an extra, I don't know, say 5 hours to gain 15 minutes from each of those parts, was that worth it? You know, like,
well, there's that chart that keeps popping up that it tracks. I want to say the y-axis is like how much time you've saved, and then it shows on the x-axis, here's how many, what is it, like how many parts you have to make to earn that time back or something. I'll see if I can find it and post it, because every time I've seen it, it's very eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah, because like it's so easy to fall into the trap of like, again, trying to go for like a perfect program right off of the bat, but that's almost like not the case. And that's probably somebody like, you know, after years and years and years of development, which is something that you have to like, again, you're building a system when you do this to be like, if I want to do high mix, low volume on my piece of equipment, like on my automated piece of equipment, what are the things that I need to accomplish in order to do that? And it's like, you need to know that your tool paths are good, that you have a dialed in tool library, you have dialed in tool paths like in Fusion, that's templates. And like maybe that's, you have playbooks for like types of parts. If you do very similar types of parts, this type of part, this tool does this, blah, 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 whatever. And like good fixture library. And if you can, it's not a necessity, but I think it helps having some kind of verification software like Camplate or whatever, just to like double check your work before it goes to the machine. And like over time, you will get to a point where you can just like, you set up during the day and then you just fucking fire and forget at night, you know? Or if you get really, really, really good and like you've fully vetted your process, you're just firing and forgetting that fucker. And this was like the big soapbox thing, which is like, everybody wants to believe that they're in the fucking like, that they're like these special boys that, oh, you can't automate what I do, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, shut the fuck up. More than likely, your problems aren't really that unique. You can automate. It's just about doing the fucking work, you know?
Right.
It's really not that crazy if you take a step back and you look at what you're doing as like, if you believe that you can't automate your process, you're never going to be able to automate your process. And the industry more than likely is going to pass you by because somebody's going to do what you're doing. I was just talking to somebody about this. He's like, who's a one-man guy doing stuff. And he does a lot of shit like kind of old school. And he's like, I'm making money right now, but if somebody wanted to just do what I'm doing with like different automated equipment, they would eat my lunch, but I'm just going to keep doing it like this and I'm going to retire soon. So I don't give a fuck. But he fully recognizes that somebody could do what he's doing 100%.
That somebody
better.
Will do what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time.
It is only a matter of time. And so when it's like, high mix, when you see like, oh, I can't get that because I'm high mix, low volume, and and I'm this and I'm that, and I do very unique shit. It's like, you probably don't. We're all in the 80%. Like, get over yourself.
Right. Yeah. We're all in the center of the bell curve.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
there are some of us who are probably like at the tail, or like on the bottom or the top or whatever. But like, for the most part, we're just fucking regular, degular guys and gals who are making parts for people. And like, the industry is going in a way where like two things need to happen. Two things are, well, I think there's one thing that's going to happen and one thing that needs to happen. But the thing that's happening is like, automation is going to like win out ultimately. And people need to like understand that and get on board that with the shit that they're doing now isn't necessarily going to translate to automation 1-to-1. Like, if you're hammering in, like, what the fuck did I say? It's like, if you have a bunch of screws and you have a screwdriver, right? And you're just fucking doing, and you're like, gosh, my arm's getting fucking tired. I'm done with this. And somebody's like, oh, hey, I got the solution for you. And you're like, no, whatever. It's like, I just need to get this thing into this piece of wood faster. And you buy a fucking hammer, right? Like, you could probably get those screws into that wood, but it's just not like, it's not the most efficient thing. And then you're going to be like, oh God, I guess there's no better way.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, you need a fucking drill. That's what you need. It's
right. Like, there are many ways to automate. I think to summarize what you're saying, there's many ways to automate, and people turn, I think, because they're so popular and prevalent, they're like, cobots are the answer to everything.
God damn, dude. Like, one of my favorite things is the cobot pallet system, which is like this weird like hybrid. I'm like on the fence about it. I think they have their place. Like, you can throw one together like pretty cheap, but at the end of the day, like, you're stressing a cobot more than it needs. Like, there's just
the right tool for the right job. Like, if you have tiny parts that don't stress those pallets, it seems like it's a great thing. But it sounds like the weight limit, which, by the way, I didn't realize UR had a higher weight limit model now again.
It's more expensive than just going with the Fanuc CRX that you can buy in McMaster, by the way.
Is it? I think they have a 20 kilogram one now or something.
Yeah. And I think it's like 70 grand. And the 25 kilogram CRX is like 60 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would like, if I'm picking a cobot, it like, and I have a choice between Fanuc and anybody else in terms of
right,
like,
the
price.
Industry standard or something else.
Their joints are going to be better. I guarantee it. Cause like, it's a selling point of UR. That's like, hey, we can change your joint in like 5 minutes in the field. And it's like, well, on a Fanuc industrial robot and most other industrial robots, changing a joint isn't really a problem I ever think about. So
I can't remember if it was somebody on Instagram that was complaining about that or online, but they were saying that UR doesn't even publish, or at the time didn't publish, mean time between failure numbers. So you couldn't even really figure it out. Whereas like Fanuc's been doing that forever.
You can, with like a tool like RoboGuide and stuff, you can run a simulation that will tell you within like a reasonable percentage the life of your joints. And they did that at Methods, and it was within like a fucking month or something, because they like maxed out a robot, or like they were like technically overweight at distance or something. And it was like, or no. They found out about the simulation after the fact.
After it failed.
And then they went back and reran the simulation and then checked the date, and it was like dumb accurate. I mean, that being said, RoboGuide is a $10,000 piece of software, so I would hope it does something like that.
Right.
But
you would either have to borrow it or like pay somebody for them to do that, or you would have to have so many URs that it makes sense to buy a $10,000 piece of software.
Yeah, exactly.
I found that graph, by the way. I'll post it. Future Dylan will post it in the show notes. It's from XKCD, and it's titled, "How long can you work on making a routine task more efficient before you're spending more time than you save?" And so the x-axis is how often do you do the task from 50 times a day to yearly, and the y-axis is how much time do you shave off from 1 second to 1 day. And so for like example, if you do a task daily and you save 1 minute, over 5 years you only save a day.
Yeah.
So
that is crazy.
Yeah, it's quite nice to look at, at least gives you a roundabout way of like, is this worth me spending a few hours on today?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a beautiful graphic.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful graphic. Yeah, fuck, dude. I'm just like fucking, I'm so ramped up right now. No, there's just like a lot of shit that like went, that like a lot of conversations that were had this week that just like really ended up like, and I mean like, I'm sure that people are gonna step away from this like, who the fuck is this guy to tell me this, which is fine. I mean, people are gonna do what they're gonna do.
So to circle back, when we were talking, the reason I had reached out about that whole training people versus automation thing was that I was telling you your, emergent business that you're, calling still Skill Gap Insurance right now.
Yeah,
I think is so important, because I think that that's going to be like such a big factor in the coming years, is how quickly can you train someone from knowing nothing or from knowing very little to being a level person, or even, a B level person.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody that is self-sufficient on their own. Oh, that's redundant, but like that's self-sufficient, who you can just like, okay, cool. And that is
self-sufficient on their own by themselves doing their own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is actually a really fantastic, this also like wraps the book in, which is talking about somebody who is moving on in the company, and they came with all this process flow and this other stuff and blah, 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 how they automated all this shit for their current job. And it was clear that the thought wasn't put into who is actually going to do that work, which I think is like a very good, like he's talking about for business, but for us, I've had these conversations with people that are like very high level, like, oh, I do this and it's not a problem. And it's like, that's not a problem for you because you're really good. Like, but thinking about somebody who doesn't know, like I've seen this before where like in my brain, this is an easy task. To you, this is an easy task. To like another apps guy, it's an easy task, whatever. And then you get in front of a customer who doesn't know the machine, barely knows what's going on, and this is now a very difficult task. And so your playbook for training or whatever is just out the window because they just don't know anything. And so everything that you've built program-wise, macro-wise, whatever, just doesn't work anymore because this person, you built that with your brain in mind, not with somebody else's brain in mind, which is, I mean, the thing that we're like, I don't remember who I was talking to about this recently. It's like, oh, I've done this. And they're like, I wouldn't do that because it's easy. I'm just kind of repeating myself here. And it's like, yeah, but like, are you not think it's like, oh, this is, I love when when people tell me, I don't think that's actually a problem. It's like, but like you work for yourself, you own your own shop. You're like running this, you're doing that. Like you are a high level guy. Obviously you don't think this is a problem because you're not running into like, and you yourself are not going to hire somebody, at least at this moment, like you wouldn't hire somebody who doesn't know anything probably. So you don't anticipate an issue like that, but
right. The analogy I used the other day, I was talking to a friend about this problem that I see upcoming is, and I think that this is going to be kind of the secret sauce if you and Scoob can figure it out. I see training someone in machining as figuring out the branches of a tree. Like, I think that machinists, you encounter so much and you start amassing all of this knowledge. It's tough to know what's a branch that holds up the tree and what's just a leaf of like knowledge. And the task is to like, you know, the trunk is like, okay, learn how to read a micrometer, learn how to like become a machinist and understand it. And then you start branching off of, here's how to set up a vise. And here's how, you know, do this. Here's how to do that. And then there's like little leaves. It's like, here's how to load a program into a FANUC. Where it's like, you don't need that to like be a successful machinist right off the bat. You can learn that on the job. And so like the challenge is finding all of those branches and saying, this is a branch of learning. This is something everyone needs to know. And we need to start on this.
Yeah. And in addition to that, it's how much time do you spend on that versus something else? Like,
right. Yeah.
Cause it's like, okay, this is how you do a vice thing. This is how you like run in a vice, which is an important thing to know. But do you need to spend like 2 days on that type of thing? Like, you show somebody a couple times, you like, it's like, this is how you do it. You knock it out, make them do it. And then you're like, all right, did you take notes? Cool. Moving on. But like something like loading programs or like program navigation are like really big things that you take for granted. Like the other day, like the guy in Idaho that I help, we've gone to a point like through like multiple trips on site, and like I know what he's capable of, so we don't program like too crazy, but we've finally gotten to a point where he is comfortable to just run new programs himself, which is awesome. But then we like run into like, there's always the little things that pop up, like, oh, the tool broke, so how do I get back to that point now to like rerun it again? And it's like, oh yeah, I literally have no idea how to do that. And luckily on a Haas, it's very easy because you could just be like, tool number M6 hit down in memory, and it just goes to that tool number. You know, it doesn't care about anything, even if it's MO6 in the program. It could be TO1, whatever. It just, the Haas control is just very intelligent that way, or maybe it's really dumb that way. I don't know. But like, it's like, oh, this is how you do that. And he's like, okay, cool. And then he does it, and he calls me back like 20 minutes later, and he's like, so how do I do that again? You know? And it's like, yes, muscle memory. That is a thing. And that's something I was talking to Easton about today, which I think a lot of us, like people that are in this trade and want to be in this trade, don't really learn from theory as much as they do from just doing, which is, I guess, like also kind of bringing it back to principles, which is like what he calls like experiential learning. Because I'm probably, maybe this year, I'm going to spend some time with Easton doing some stuff, depending on how things shake out for him. And he's like, how much time do you think we need? And I was like, a week. And he's like, holy shit, that's a lot of time. And it's like, well, it's like, and he said it, and this is where this is coming from. He's like, after a couple of days, I stopped learning, and it's like, and I need to do it. And it's like, oh, no. We're going to spend much less time on theory and a lot more time on the doing aspect of it. Because like, I know from just having interacted with like hundreds of people now in this industry, like the amount of people that can just learn by like, here's a fucking document, go at it, versus I'm going to show you really quickly how to do this, and now I'm going to make you do it for me. It's that there's no balance there. It's like not even close.
Yeah.
80% of us learn from doing, and then there's totally not that many.
Well, and one thing that I've seen Jay Pearson do, and then Devin and Uriel were talking about on their podcast too, was having QR codes linked to videos too, comment stuff like that. And then also just taking the videos on your phone. Yeah. Like that was one thing that Devin and Uriel were talking about, was that it needs to be so low effort not only does it need to be solo effort, they were talking about do it while you're training someone.
Yeah.
So then you only have to train someone once.
Yep.
You know, if your first employee is asking about this, your second employee will most likely ask about this. So the first time you have to train them, just have them film you with their phone or your phone, and then put it up, put a QR code to it or something. You know, problem solved.
Yeah. That is like, I was thinking about doing that because like I just did some training on a Haas lathe on Monday, and I was like, gosh, I should be doing the QR code thing and just like hosting it somewhere so that I can like, that is training specific for that customer, you know, that is like their training. It's just linked to what we did for them specifically. Cause I think that's also that's all this is, right? Is that it's all so specific. Like Devin, like, I don't know, the likelihood of like the way what Jay's doing, like translating for somebody else is probably like kind of low. It's like when you find a YouTube video for you're like, oh, I need to do this thing. And you find a YouTube video that's like almost what you need, but it's missing just enough information that you can't fucking finish. You're like, gosh. And these guys are building their videos very specific to what they're training. And that's like our goal, I guess, is just like when we go to train somebody, it's very specific and not theoretical. Like there's obviously going to be overlap, but then it's applying that to what they're doing specifically versus just like, well, here's some, like, here's basically the manual rewritten how we want to display the information. Have at it. This will be fun for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. I think as I look towards hiring someone in the near-ish future, I'm starting to like pick up on those things in podcasts and videos, and oh, that might be a good training tip. Oh, that, you know, we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's something that like that. I mean, fuck, dude, that's like kind of the thing in the book too, is where he's talking about laying everything out. He was talking about it from like a very high level, you know, of like the organizational level, but it also could be for us, like boots on the ground, like already in the organization, of laying out like, what does onboarding an employee look like for me, and how do you stress test it? You know, like, could you do that with like some fucking random person, you know, like a buddy who's not in manufacturing or who's lightly in manufacturing, that you could like bring into your shop and be like, this is what I think, this is how I think this is going to go, before you actually hire somebody. I mean, not everybody has that luxury, but
no, but I mean, I told you, I think a month or two ago, I had my friend Ryan out.
Yeah.
And he just came and, you know, interned for the day at the shop. And I had a lot of fun teaching him little things, you know, having him load parts. But it also really emphasized how much I'm going to have to train. You know, even if they're a competent technical person, even if they've been around manufacturing, there's just so many little things that are so crucial to the kind of parts we want to send out that just going to be a lot of work. I think it's going to be fun. I'm not scared of it. It's just going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. And I think that's ultimately like such a good thing to know, like going into it, that it's going to be a shitload of work. Cause hubris is a killer. Cause like that was my experience hiring like Scoob and James and whatever. Is there's so much shit that was in my head about how he did things that's like, oh, what are we gonna do? And it's like, oh, we're just doing this thing, and like just this thing is like a massive project that I was like, that wasn't organized anywhere, and then I'm handing off, and it's just a nightmare from the jump. And it's so unfair.
I'm starting to think that whoever we end up hiring, the first thing I'm going to have them do for a few months, I mean, obviously they'll help around the shop and load parts if I need it and stuff like that. But I think I'm going to have a heavy emphasis on final inspection and packing.
Yeah.
Because I've said it a few times on the podcast. My last job started me out in inspection. It was actually a whole mess with a recruiter that lied to me. He goes, "Oh yeah, they're looking for a Fusion programmer." And then I go to the interview and they're like, "We don't even know what Fusion is. What are you talking about? We're looking for somebody in inspection." And
cool.
I was like, "All right, I don't want to work where I currently am. I'll take inspection." And I learned more in like a year and a half in inspection about being a good machinist than I ever did as being a machinist. You know, you learn that like incredible attention to detail.
Yeah. I think like some of the best inspectors I have ever worked with are former machinists that like were kind of tired of the grind. And so they go into inspection. And then when you like learn from those guys, it's like a very fascinating, like a good machinist as an inspector is like such an ally to you because number one, like typically it's not as adversarial, you know, as what you can typically get where there's like this huge like headbutting and they know how to make the part. And so they're like, this might be happening and that might be happening. So the flip side of that being also seeing how parts are made, especially because you guys are doing good work, would make them better and kind of like set the bar, you know, and the expectation for them once they actually do get their hands on a machine. So
exactly. And it was the things like looking at deburring and seeing where common mistakes in deburring are made, seeing where common burrs are missed, finding jaw clamping marks, finding, tiny clamping on chips marks, all that stuff was stuff, I'd known about as a machinist, but when your entire job is like going through a lot of parts and doing 100% visual inspection,
yeah,
man, you learn all the ways a machinist can screw up a part and all the ways you could potentially make it better. You start seeing stuff, you're like, why is this not deburred on the machine? And they go, oh, yeah, I guess it could be. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like this was like, what are you trying to save time? This would have been 5 seconds. Yeah. And somebody scrapped it because they dug into it with a burr whip.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I'm thinking that might be the start of it. Like, technically right now in our process, we don't have final inspection. Like, I do a final visual as I'm packaging, but we more or less 100% straight off the machine. We check everything right there while the next part is running.
Yeah.
But having, I think, somebody just learning how to measure, checking against prints or models, all of that, in addition to also being our visual inspector too.
Yeah.
And learning alongside with me or Brad, I think might be a really good place for them to start.
Oh, for sure. Especially because now what we're also talking about is you are building a like path to like sustainable growth in your process, right? Instead of just because it also would be very easy to just hire somebody to just do what you're doing right now. And you guys just continue to like build a team like that. But now you're talking about building an inspection process and like having a like quote unquote real inspection department and a packaging department and like building processes around that it's like, okay, this guy moves to doing what we're doing and now we all follow this same process, like you're rotating on who's doing that potentially, or maybe it's like always that person or whatever. It's as you continue to grow, now you're not scrambling to like, oh, now we have 10 machines and we still haven't done this thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, now we have to. And that's like, if you ever wanted to go ISO or AS, now like you're starting to kind of like have the bones of that in place. Which is pretty cool. That's a smart, like, I like that a lot. It's very smart.
Thanks. We'll see when the rubber hits the road if that's at all feasible or a good idea, but that's at least where my mind goes at first.
Well, I think it is. I mean, it is feasible, right? Because if you plan around it and like if you like fuck, who I was talking to the guy in Idaho, and we were talking about manifesting, and like manifesting is basically just planning. You know, like if that's what you want to do, you just work towards that goal of making that a reality. And I think that makes it's very easy. It also allows you to hire a lower level guy and be able to bring them in because you're not relying on them for machining performance, right? You get to like kind of take some joker who doesn't know anything and be able to bring them up through in the Proteum way by starting them in final inspection, creating final inspection and packaging for this individual, and then showing them how Proteum works. Like now, like I guess now we're talking about building a culture, a Proteum culture. Which is no, I think you should. I think you should, and you can, and you will do this because why wouldn't you?
Yeah. I more meant
Yeah.
if the person we hire is not receptive to that, I guess is the better thing. But then I guess the answer to that is they're not the right fit. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck them.
So I guess that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the way that we will try and see how it works, because I hadn't even thought about the idea of not having to backfill those positions later on when we've grown. I think that that's a great point as well.
Yeah, it's because the amount of I mean, again, like the amount of shops that they just haphazardly grow and they just get bloated. They're very inefficient. They're just not thinking like, oh, we're doing this now, I guess, like, which is what I was doing, which is like, we'll just figure it out. We'll just figure it out. And like no plan and then no process. And you just get to this, like you're building a total house of cards, right. Which is just a nightmare where like any little like thing that happens can just topple the whole thing over. Where like, oh, you're doing this or he's doing that. And like they own that completely. It's not documented anywhere. So like, oh, Dylan's out. I guess we're not doing this 5-axis part or whatever. I don't know. You know,
yeah.
Like, oh no.
You know, and actually, now that you've said that, I guess another benefit of starting them in inspection is if they make it, past the probationary period, whatever CMM we get, we could just send them to training for that. Like that is something that has an established training route that I can just pay for.
Yep.
So that's another pro right there. Like, I mean, hopefully by this point you'll have a badass program and I can just send them to you. But in lieu of that, I can at least send them and, go learn PCDMS, go learn Calypso, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's cool. I like that. I like that idea a lot. That's almost like when you think about it, it's like everybody should kind of do that,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I told you, I worked as a programmer for years before I was in inspection. It was so funny because the inspector I first worked with when I first started being a programmer, which was kind of an asshole, but rightfully so. Like he would constantly get on my case about blend lines and deburring and things like that. And I just kind of blew him off as like, oh, he doesn't like me because I'm young. And I think that part of it was that. But a lot, what I learned later on is that he actually worked then at the same job I did earlier than I did, like at the one where I went into inspection. So he learned at that level of inspection and then moved to the company that I started at. And I was like, oh, this is all full circle. I was a shitty machinist and he was just telling me what was up.
Yeah. Yeah, which is radical honesty, baby.
Yeah. He was radically honest.
Yeah. And I think like that there's always a fine line to that. Obviously, like, we talked about that on the last one, which is if you're too, like, it sounds like such a lame thing to say, but like if you're too honest, like you could scare people away. But like there is in our industry we just have to have some amount of tact so that like you don't scare away somebody that's very interested by being a fucking douchebag. Like, even if it is true, there's always a way to say it in a way that's not going to like make them be like, nah, this trade isn't for me, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Which is so easy.
Oh yeah.
It's so easy to do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get to the last two questions. What did you research this week?
I guess. Oh, we did get a lathe Cincinnati Millicron for free, which is kind of crazy.
Bearing the lead at the end of the show.
Yeah. That was a wild one because like there was a dude shop right around the corner from us. Dude just like folded, and my buddy Adam, the guy who helps me, he works with a dude that knows this guy, and he's like, he's just getting rid of stuff. Do you want this lathe? And we're like, sure. And so he was close enough that they drove it on the street, but they fucking picked that thing up on a forklift and drove it from one shop to the other on the forklift on the road and put it in our shop. And it doesn't cost us anything. It should work. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Like it's more or less like whether or not it's going to come to Idaho with me when I go to Idaho. But having a lathe will be nice. So kind of looking and like, does Fusion support that? It does. A lot of trying to think of other stuff. My brain has been so fried. Like I've been sick. Been feeling good today, but I just traveled way too much Friday to Tuesday, which was a bummer. Monday I got absolutely massacred by the Swarf Unlimited pump when I was adjusting a coolant line. I was like, oh, I just need to. We had to adjust. I think I posted it on my story like, yeah, the pump is legit. I like it moves some coolant, and I found that out in a very spectacular way when that line popped off and just shot all over me. I was like, oh no. That was hilarious. But hey, I was in Arizona, so I dried off very quickly. Outside of that though, like no, not a ton of not a ton of like real research going on other than the lathe stuff. What about you, man? You just been grinding.
Yeah. I did have one thing that you might find, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but I'm going to guess that you're going to start hearing about it.
Yeah.
I had a few people send me, have you heard of gimbal automation?
Is that the spindle gripper thing?
Yeah. So I had a few people send me this, and it's like a couple different kinds of spindle grippers, TSC or like a side mount block one, and then a few pneumatic vices. And everybody was asking me, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And I didn't recognize the spindle gripper, and maybe that's a unique thing, but the vice they're selling is the same exact Chinese vice that Haas rebrands as well. Though Haas is like $2,000 more than gimbal automations for the exact same vice.
Wow.
Yeah, you get that Haas on the side of it, and apparently it's worth more. So I did look into it. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea if it's any good. The gripper, spindle gripper, actually looks like they might make it. But yeah. I know for a fact that vice, unless they ripped off a Chinese design, is one that I've seen on AliExpress a handful of times.
In terms of cheap automation, there's a company, I think, in the US that makes no, they might not be a US company, but they knock off the Shunk pneumatic vice, and it's like way, way cheaper, but it's still like just as high quality.
It's not Air Vice, right?
It's not Air Vice. I don't remember who it is. Like, maybe it is Air Vice. I'm not sure. I need to look it up, but like, I don't know. That's like a straight up knockoff of the Shunk vice, but the gimbal stuff is interesting. Spindle gripper stuff. There's a company called like Automation in a Box, I think, that does spindle gripper stuff too. Spindle gripper stuff is very interesting, intriguing. Seems kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it looks really cool. I mean, seeing Devin and Uriel use it is very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it has its own host of issues that you have to overcome, just like any automation project. But for the price, it's kind of hard to beat.
Yeah, exactly. It is a very good way. I mean, it's like you said, for price, like if you're talking a spindle gripper and like a 3D printed tray, like just to give it a go, fuck it, like might as well try it. Commend them for that.
Yeah, but past that, haven't been researching too much. I think I talked about the cool speeds last time.
Yeah,
I bought them. I have 2 of them waiting. They're going to be in use probably by end of the day tomorrow. Sick. MSC was significantly cheaper than my distributor, which was kind of frustrating for them. I mean, I even tried to give them the business. I was like, hey, I need to order this. And they took a while to get me a quote, and then they got me a quote. And I was just like, you know what? I'll just Google the part number just to see what happens.
Yeah.
Boom. MSC comes at $200 cheaper a piece.
Yeah, they're probably buying it off of MSC and upcharging you.
Well, what's crazy is I sent him screenshots. I was like, can you do this or better? This is what MSC has them for.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, well, me and the rep are super surprised that that they can sell them that cheap. And I'm like, the rep should not be at all surprised because they're selling them to MSC. Like, what are you talking about? So anyway, that MSC got my business. I tried to get my distributor though.
MSC is hilarious. I get calls from them occasionally and they're like, do you use McMaster-Carr and all these other places? And it's like, yeah, I typically just use you guys to buy tools and then I'll use McMaster for hardware. And they're like, we have hardware too. And it's like, yeah, but your website fucking sucks. So no thank you.
Dude.
It's the worst.
Not that we need any more fuel to that fire, but today I was looking for a 330 seconds with 10 thou radius.
Yeah.
I already had bought one from them like months and months ago, and we've been using it, and I just wanted a backup. I go in there, I hit 10 thou radius, 330 seconds, and it pops up one result, and it's not the one I bought. I'm like, okay. So I unselect 330 seconds, go back into the radii, and there's 8 to 10 thou and 10 thou.
Yeah.
And then like 9 thou and 8/10 or something. I was like, all right, I'll check all of those. And then you go into the size into decimal inch instead of fraction, and it's like 93.7, 93.8, 94, and 93. I'm like, all right, I'll check all of those. Oh, what do you know? Now I can find the tool that I bought last time.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to be kidding me. Come on.
It is so silly. Like, you're like, it's just so odd. Like, they're just scrubbing information that they get and not doing like a lot of like data consolidation, which is so annoying. Like, just hire a team of people to like, please just make this better.
What made it even more infuriating recently was that they sent out this email of like, oh, we're going to have you change your password because we've updated our system and now it's easier to use. Okay, well, now every time that I click on my cart and then I hit checkout and I'm not signed in yet, it has me sign in. And then guess what? It doesn't dump me back into my cart. It dumps me into my like account overview. So then I have to go back into my cart and hit checkout again. And how is this easier?
The fire. Oh, brother. Yeah. The login stuff where it's like, oh, I can do this. And then I've done it like where I started building a cart on my phone and it's like, oh, you got to, and I'm logged in on my phone and it's like, okay, then it's kind of there. And then I would go to my laptop because it's easier to use on your laptop and I can see it in my cart. But then when I would go there, it was like, hey, do you want to add this? Like, no, it's already there. And it just like was in this weird loop where if I logged in from one place, I could see my cart, but I couldn't add to it. And then if I logged in from another place, like I could add to the cart and I could see it. The other items weren't there. And it's like, what is happening? Why is this so hard? You guys are huge. I don't know.
I have too many stories about
little
things, not even little things that just should work on an e-commerce store that their entire business is e-commerce and they somehow still screw it up.
Yeah. And they don't really have the excuse of being like young, like Fusion, you know, like
no,
they are the guys. They've bought other better distributors. and like murdered them
Yeah.
and then ruined them. It's so crazy.
Yeah. I still use them because free upgrade to overnight shipping and,
Dude,
stupid shit like that. Like
they get you every time with that. It's like, God, you son of a bitch. All right.
Yeah. It's like 4 p.m. I need a tool tomorrow. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to MSC, I guess.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I was researching is anodize, because we just got our first fixture project or fixture. Yeah. We'll call it a project, fixture project for the fixture building side of the company now.
Awesome.
To do a complete solution. And we texted a bit about that process. And that was one where it was just like a lot of sticking to the guns, where I like essentially oh, I guess we're starting over. But this was just something where it was like I don't want to do this. Like I want to do this side of the business correctly to what my values are for what we're trying to accomplish. Like if I'm not going to do this whole thing, if I'm not providing the solution, then I'm not going to do any of it. And that was surprising to the customer, but it ultimately ended up working out, and we're going to move forward with it. But that was like, it was like I was telling you, it feels weird to say no to stuff, and I didn't think we were going to end up doing it. But then he texted me on Monday, and he's like, "Where I go?" And I was like, "Oh, sick." So that's been researching anodize in Utah, because I will be making that in Utah very soon.
Worst case, send it down to me, and I'll get it anodized at my guys.
Nice, perfect.
All right. What else have you been working on? None of us are perfect. What are you working on this week on yourself?
Like communication, really, personal and business communication. That's just like, I've had some like conversations recently, like with Scoob and with like friends or whatever, where it's like, oh shit, like I do that thing where I'm just like I'm having a conversation in my head, and like I'm leaving out critical information because I know it, obviously. And so I'm making assumptions that this person knows it. And you start communicating like half of the story. Also, the other thing in terms of communication is like what I wrote this note right here for me and for us, which
slow down.
Fucking slow down, baby. and
yeah, we were a little bit fired up last time.
Yeah, and I think we did a better job this time. You'll let me know.
Yeah. If you're listening and we sound, less out of our minds this time, please let us know.
There's no way. I mean, there was a little section in there where I was really fired up. So, we'll see. But that's been the biggest thing is just focusing on communication and trying to make sure like just answering an email like right away. Like, oh, sometimes like I fall into this trap where I don't want to respond to this until I have like an answer, the whole thing, the brain space, whatever. But then if you don't answer it right away, then all of us, and then you start moving on, then like time just slips. And so instead of saying like even something like, "Hey, I acknowledge this, I'll get back to you," you just say nothing for like days, and you're like, "Holy shit, oh fuck." And so just working on responding in a timely manner to everybody instead of just like a select, I mean, not everybody, but like to important shit, what I think is important stuff, to make sure like it's just very consistent communication. That's a work in progress, but we're getting better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So last time I was working on sleeping.
Yeah. Go on.
Better. Good. I'm not getting as much as I would like, but I'm getting heaps more than I was. So that's a positive.
Yes.
And I think communication is also something that I'm actively working on, both with my customers and friends and family. I think that part in the book really hit home for me, that it's just unfair to others to have all these conversations in my head and not give them a chance to defend themselves, or if there is even need for defense. They might think the same way I do, and keeping that stuff bottled up just only hurts me and them. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm working on as well.
It's that Key and Peele sketch, the one,
the texting one.
Yeah, where Key's getting just like fired, and Jordan's just like, he's just like, yeah, whatever.
Do you even want to hang out? Oh, he's so kind.
Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah. It is that to a T. Somebody actually, one of my friends called me out on it. It was like, you got to stop having conversations in your head. And it's like, oh, fuck. Like, we were just having a pretty intense conversation. And it's like, I am learning a lot about myself in this conversation right now. This is very interesting and cool. So that was, it never stops. Growth never stops, baby.
That is for sure. Well, thank you so much. Next week is the 200th episode of Within Tolerance. And many of you have asked for me to be a guest on the show. And so right now it's going to be Chris doing part of the show, and Josh Hacko is also going to be a co-host. And I've got some questions from the Patreon, but I will also leave some room open for those who are on Instagram or whatever. I'll post about it. Please send in your questions for me that you want answered, and we will try to get to them. But nice. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to all the Patreon members who make this show possible. And we will be back next week.